Welcome to In the Boat with Ben and Rachel. I am Ben.
And I'm Rachel.
And with this podcast, we try to encourage and just motivate creators,
Creative people.
creative people. Yeah. Um,
Even if you're not actually creating something.
creators. Creators is a really broad term.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to write that down. What is a creator? I have something to capture this. I'm just going to do it with my computer real quick. This is terrible for a live show, but I have a note. Here it is.
What is a creator?
There, it's done. Got it. So, with this podcast, we try to encourage and motivate our fellow creators, talking about our own experiences, things we're trying, things that work, things that don't, in hopes that we will be an encouragement and at least, people will be able to see their struggles reflected in our stories and feel less alone. In today's episode, we are talking about managing time versus energy. This is a concept that I became aware of relatively recently. I have always, and still do often, think about productivity, getting things done, trying to manage my schedule in terms of my time and really focusing on that as like, well, how am I going to manage my time? And that makes a lot of sense. Like you, there are only so many hours in the day. You want to budget those hours a certain way, and once that time is spent, whatever it is you spend it on, you don't get it back, And
Right.
so if it feels like, well, that's it, that's the key. You got to, if you can figure out how to manage your time, then that's how you can get ahead. That's how you can keep up with things. But it turns out that's not entirely true. There's this other factor that I'm starting to learn. I think is even more important, and that's how you manage your energy. So, what are your thoughts on that? The difference between the two?
I definitely work in terms of energy as opposed, I do both. I work in terms of time and energy, but I'm always paying a lot of attention to the energy that I have and trying to maximize that as much as I can, which is why a lot of times, like, if there's someone who wants me to come out for a school visit, I always have my calendar open and assess what is going on that week, because school visits take a lot of energy for me. And I know that even if it's like a morning visit, I'm not going to get anything done in the afternoon. And sometimes I may not even get anything done the day before that because, you're prepping and there are nerves and all of that. And so I'm constantly thinking in terms of what is this going to require from me?
Yeah.
Which has actually helped me say no when I don't feel like I can commit to something, because a lot of times you just want to say yes to everything. But I think once you start paying more attention to the energy that it takes to do certain things, and not everybody is the same. Some people get energy from school visits or whatever.
Right.
But I don't. Like, it depletes me. So
yeah, and we're going to dive into that a lot more, talking about how energy works and how it works differently for different people and that kind of thing. I think that's super interesting.
mm-hmm.
It's become clearer and clearer to me when we're talking about the difference between time and energy, that no matter how much time I have, the amount of time I have doesn't really matter a whole lot if I'm not bringing energy to what I'm doing. And it's a little bit different from, like there's sometimes, even if you don't feel like you have a lot of energy, you can push through if you're under deadline, like you can kind of force yourself to do things. But I know that I do my best work. I am the most focused and the most productive when I have energy. And when I have to push myself, or when I have to stay up late to work on something, or when I'm trying to force myself to work in those times that I don't have as much energy, I find that my work just isn't quite as good. Um, it ends up kind of stealing energy. like it it's like I'm trying to spend energy that I don't actually have, and it steals it from other things that I could spend it on, and so it
Mm.
bleeds into other areas of my life. And so even even when I have time, um, I'm really finding that understanding how my energy is and what my energy is doing, is a really important factor, because working on stuff without energy just is not. It's more and more. It's just not working for me.
Well, and if you're constantly in energy deficiency, you're headed toward burnout too.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
I think the two are just very tangled together. Like you can't really take one from the other, because if you don't have energy to do something, that's costing you more time. And I mean, typically, if you don't have the energy to do something, you're actually taking more time to do it. You know, even if you're making yourself do it.
I think it'd be helpful to kind of describe what it feels like on both sides. Like, what does it feel like to have energy, and what does that look like with your work? And then what does it feel like to not have energy, and what does that look like with your work?
Hmm. I feel like it's a hard question. I mean, most of the time I have energy for my work, and it's this feeling of this is what I want to do with my time almost, and feeling excited about getting to work, even if there's like a little bit in the back, because writers deal with this all the time, but just that little voice in the back of your head that's like, this, you know, you're not going to be able to do this, this is going to be terrible. But just feeling like you're coming to the page excited about the things that you're going to do.
Yeah. So excitement is a
Yeah.
is a feeling.
I think excitement, and just having a better capacity to deal with those negative voices, maybe, is a feeling
Yeah.
of having energy. Because when you don't have the energy, those voices can like plummet you, you know?
Yeah. I don't know. It's almost, I kind of, for some reason, got a picture in my brain of like an army in your head.
Yeah.
And when you when you have, like, the more energy you have, the
You
bigger
can
that
fight
army
off
is.
those.
And
Yeah.
and when you're a creator, you're kind of fighting battles on multiple fronts. There is, the negative voices, there are the constraints that you're working inside of, there are the limitations of your tools and having to work through those things. There's the trying to ideate and create something, the actual act of creation. So it feels like there are a lot of fronts, and there's probably some hierarchy of importance to those things for actually getting something done. And the fewer uh, the fewer soldiers you have, the 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 more you have to, like, kind of let some of those other fronts go, like focus on the most important things. But then, the enemy can kind of sneak in on those fronts that you're not occupying and get you in other ways.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a helpful metaphor, but that in my head it kind of makes sense.
Yeah. I think there's also a sense of lightness. I know that sounds kind of like hard to describe, but when I don't feel like I have energy for my work, or even like my runs in the mornings, I physically feel heavy. Like
Mm-hmm.
my feet are dragging. I don't pick up my feet. Sometimes I'll even like trip on things when I'm like, I don't have
Yeah.
the energy to, it's like this physical sensation of heaviness when I don't have the energy. But then on the opposite end, a physical sensation of like the lightness and excitement of creative work.
When I have energy, I feel like I'm on offense. And what I mean by that is, and this kind of goes for creativity and um, managing home stuff. There's kind of this posture of readiness, and I think that's what I think of when I think of offense. It's like it's kind of a readiness combined with a like instead of passively waiting for things to come to you, you feel like
You have your
you
plays.
can, yeah, you can, you what?
You have your plays.
Yeah, like okay, I've got to play for this. I'm gonna,
Mm-hmm.
and you kind of go into this attack mode. I feel like I'm using the like violent language, but
Sports.
sports, war, um, but yeah, you go into this mode of like approaching and engaging more easily, whereas the times when I don't have energy, I feel like I'm on defense, and not like a good defense like okay, I'm ready. It's almost like I'm one of the players that's like behind the line hoping that the play doesn't end up coming to me so that I don't have to do anything,
Yeah.
because I'm like, oh gosh, if I,
What am I gonna do?
yeah. um so yeah, some days are like that. So yeah, when I another way that I know that I am kind of depleted of energy is I'm much more easily distracted, because the thing that I want to do or should be doing feels harder than just being letting myself be distracted by other things.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, it's like, well, it's easier to look busy than to actually be busy and be about my work.
So focus is something when you have the energy to do your work, or when you have adequate energy.
Yeah. That excitement piece is really interesting to me. I think about excitement and also enthusiasm. There's a kind of energy when it comes to my work of feeling really enthusiastic and like, not like we're going to conquer the world. I'm going to make something that's going to go viral, and but I believe in what I'm doing and I feel enthusiastic about it, and it's almost like the idea of the finished version of what I'm creating is pulling me. I feel like I'm being pulled toward
Mm-hmm.
finishing that thing. And the opposite of that, of course, is like feeling like I've got a bungee cord on my back and
Mm-hmm.
I'm like fighting against it, trying to get to that.
Well, and I will say that in a lot of creative work, we can reach a point where it does feel like that, where you're just like you're trudging through mud or something. And I don't know that it has as much to do with energy as it does with um, just getting close to the end product. And I know for writers, my writer friends and I talk about it a lot, is that we oftentimes get to a point in a manuscript where we're like, this does not look like what I saw in my head. And so it gets to be work, like it's actual work to finish it, because we're not quite as excited about that idea that we were in the beginning.
Yeah.
So I think there's also a distinction there, and it doesn't have as much to do with energy as it is like a natural creative slump kind of thing that happens with some projects that take a long time.
Yeah. That kind of brings up an interesting question for me, though, that I will bring into the show in just a little bit. But first, I think we've done a pretty good job of defining what it looks like to have energy or not have energy. And I want to get into some of the ways that you and I purposefully manage our energy. I think there are a couple of different approaches. Um, one is kind of observing and being able to recognize when you tend to be energized and optimizing for that. And then I think the other thing is practices that actually produce energy. And so I I think those are really the two biggest places, the two biggest opportunities where we can figure out how to make our energy work for us. So with those two things in mind, how have you, or what have you observed as far as the state of your energy throughout the week or throughout the day? And then what are some things that you do to help produce more energy?
I feel like I always have a lot of. I just said that a lot.
It's okay. I can edit it out.
I feel like I always have a lot of energy for my creative work throughout the week. I think where the complication comes in for me is in relationships and dealing with, we have a household of 6 children, and there are a lot of words and there are a lot of questions. And so managing my energy there feels much more difficult, I guess, because I tend to get quickly overwhelmed with, people talking at the same time. And so I always feel like I start the mornings with so much energy because, we're sending, it sounds terrible, we're sending them off to school, and I get to have my quiet time where I work. And it's not until they come back to school or come back home from school that I start feeling depleted of energy. And even the times that they've had an early release day when I plan on working for the amount of time that they would still be in school, I find that I don't get anything done because my energy, it's not just my energy, it's my attention too, is split between, work and home. And so I have a natural ebb and flow of my energy. And then throughout the week, I feel like Fridays and Saturdays and Sundays, my energy is still pretty high, but I'm not doing, Fridays are kind of an off day where I read. And then Saturday and Sunday, I don't do any creative work. And so I think it just has a natural, because I know that I need to expend energy on the family on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, I'm managing the energy that it would take to do creative projects. And I'm just saying, I'm not going to do those creative projects. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you kind of have to have this give and take. And for me, knowing myself and knowing I'm an introvert who expends energy when I have to, interact with a bunch of people, and we have a bunch of people in our home.
And then there's the sensory stuff too. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing from you is that kids raising kids takes energy.
Takes a lot of energy.
Yeah.
I will say
that might be a surprise to some folks.
I doubt it. I will say that one of the best things that I have done for myself to manage energy with both family and the creative stuff is minimizing the decisions that I have to make during the day. So I feel like it's a really important, making decisions takes energy.
Yeah, it does.
And so I have my routines, and I know that every morning I'm getting up and I'm starting with a run, and then I'm getting the kids to school, and then I'm doing this other thing, and then I'm doing my poetry, and then I have my things where I don't have to sit and look at the clock and be like, what am I going to do now?
Yeah. Let's get really nerdy here for a second because I find this extremely interesting. Our brains are optimized for limiting the amount of energy we have to spend. And the way that the brain handles that is it looks for opportunities. This is the whole basis of habits. The reason we form habits, positive or negative, is because of this mechanism in the brain that shortcuts the decision-making process. If the brain can figure out a way to not have to spend energy on making a decision, it will do that, and that will create a habit. That's all habits are.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it does that so well that like it happens without us being aware of it. Um, and it does that for a lot of things. For some things though, it's the situation is new enough or it's unique enough that it doesn't quite fit some pattern. Um, and that's why brains love patterns. Brains love patterns
Yeah, mine does a lot.
because patterns keep us from having the predictability keeps us from having to spend energy on thinking about what's going to happen next.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, oh, so it's and I think that's amazing. I think that's a beautiful feature of our brains. But it also means that when we do have to make decisions, we really feel that.
Mm-hmm.
You can feel the energy. Like when somebody, this is probably true for most people. Like when somebody asks you, "Where do you want to go eat?" or like, "What do you want to do this weekend?" The part of the reason why you don't like that question is because oh,
Mm-hmm.
I have to spend some energy now.
Well, and it's funny because in our relationship, that typically happens on a Friday, and I've
hmm
already like expended all of my energy. And so half the time I'm like, I don't even know what I want to eat. Like,
Yeah.
I just want food. That's it. Just bring me food. I feel bad for you. You always have to make the decision,
Well, and
even when it's my turn to pick.
I think there's a mechanism there too when it comes to making decisions. Another shortcut is because if you're concerned at all about the outcome of that decision. So for example, with something as inconsequential as where do you want to go eat, there's still some resistance there because the when I'm thinking through it, I'm like, well, what if I pick something that she doesn't like? Or what if I pick something that I'm not going to end up liking? We usually we don't have a lot of money to spend on eating out, and this is like our one chance to do that this month. And what if it's a bad experience and we've spent this money and now we don't have that money to go try something else, you know?
Wow, it's
And so
complicated.
so there's there's a mechanism in my brain that will just shut that whole thing down and be like consequences. I was going to curse there, but like forget about the consequences. I'm just going to make a decision. Let the chips fall where they may.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's kind of this like who cares attitude. Um, but it's less that I don't actually care, and it's more that caring about it costs me too much energy.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And I've observed that I employ that same strategy with um, some creative decisions. Sometimes like I come to one of those crossroads where I have to make a creative decision, and I see the machine starting to turn on, and I'm like, nope, just that one,
Yeah,
and we'll see what happens.
I do it with our kids too
Yeah.
sometimes. So you did ask like ways that you create energy.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I thought that
No.
tangent was really good at understanding, for understanding how energy works.
Yeah. No, I
So,
think it's valuable. So we automate a lot of things in
right.
our house just to mitigate decision making. So the kids know every day we eat dinner at 5:30 or close to it, and after that we have all of our, our routines. Nobody's guessing. We don't have to make decisions on when they go to bed and
Right. And we have the same things for breakfast on
hmm
the same days every morning of the week. You've put together,
meal plans
yeah.
and
I mean, so that's kind of like the parenting hack when it comes to managing energy
yeah, food
is
is a lot.
get rid of as many decisions as you possibly can.
Yeah.
Just get rid of them. Um, Automate as much as you possibly can.
Mhm.
And that way, like, when it does come time to make decisions, it doesn't feel like you're spending the last ounce of energy you have.
Yep. Trying to figure out what they're going to have for lunch today.
hmm
Um, I think physical exercise is also important. I do a lot of long running, and it seems like I can't even think of the word because I didn't get much sleep last night, but it
Sleep's
seems,
another thing.
yeah, sleep's another thing.
Yeah. So and
It
I'll
seems
just
counterintuitive. That's what I
yeah.
was going to say.
Well,
To,
I'll put a heading on this and say this is where you talk about like the things you're doing.
did you want me to go into that or do you want?
No, I
Oh,
do want you
okay.
to go into that. Um, well, you know what? Actually, before we do, I'll go ahead and talk about like
Yeah.
how my energy works. I'm an extrovert most of the time. There's also this term called omnivert that I've seen, where
Hmm.
sometimes people are extroverted, sometimes they're
Yeah, you can't
introverted,
decide
depending
which
on the
one you are.
situation.
Okay.
I can't decide. Um, but most of the time, I mentioned in the pre-show that I had a conversation with somebody when I went out shopping this morning, and it filled me up, and so I kind of was energized by that, and that's very different from Rachel, who would that would actually take energy from
I
her,
would
and
talk
that's
for like 2 minutes and then I'd be like, okay, that's it. That's all I've got.
so socialization is energizing for me, um, and I am not I'm not a morning person. I don't think by default. I think my natural state is to be more of a night owl, and I find that most of my creative energy happens like it kind of hits me mid morning, even though I get up very early to work out. So it hits me mid morning, and from mid morning until about 2 or 2:30, I've got a pretty good amount of energy to pull from, and then I go into these, doldrums where I feel a little bit sleepy. Maybe that's a good time to take a nap. I still end up taking a nap like at noon because that's when you take a nap.
Yeah.
Um,
Sometimes.
some days. So, but that's kind of the natural flow of my energy. By the time the kids come home from school, um, I tend to be somewhat depleted depending on the day, and that's probably why they probably get away with more in the afternoons with me than they would with you.
And that's probably also why I expend so much energy with them.
I
So I'm very vigilant.
I see how much energy you spend, and I'm like, no thanks. That's not fair though, so I should probably step that up a little bit. Um, so that's what I've observed is kind of the natural flow of my energy throughout the day.
Mhm.
And I guess from going through the week, I definitely like I hit Monday pretty excited and ready to go. And by Friday I'm ready to take a break, but usually I go into the weekend still feeling a little bit energized, not feeling like, oh, thank God the weekend's here. Like
Well, I
I
think there's also energy in change too, knowing that,
yeah.
you get to do something different on Saturday and Sunday and
Well, and Friday is an exciting day. Like we do our normally we go on our
grocery shopping.
grocery shopping date, and then I've got like you are in charge of the kids in the afternoon when they come home from school, and so I've got like a little bit of extra time going into the afternoon, which is
Yeah.
kind of nice. And then we watch all our shows and eat.
It's like a date night.
Yeah, it's like a date night.
Hmm.
So like Fridays
Everybody
are fun.
loves Fridays
Yeah.
in our house.
So, all right. So, how do you maintain or increase your energy? What are some things that you do?
Well, sleep is important. So I always try to get between 7.5 and 8 hours of sleep every night, which means I go to bed at like 8:30. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm a very early to bed person. I do a lot of long distance running. So I was saying before, it seems like what did I call it? Oh my gosh.
Counterintuitive.
It seems counterintuitive that running long distances, and when I say long distances, it's usually between like 8 and 12 miles. No, I do a 14 mile on Saturdays. So like really long distances, but it creates energy in me because it allows me time to myself and I can think and all of that. And, the exercise endorphins are shown to create energy.
Well,
I
and
also go
yeah,
ahead.
there's also I don't know the science on this. I think it would be really interesting to kind of dive into it. But there is an energizing effect that comes from exercising regularly,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not necessarily like, when you exercise hard, you feel tired afterwards, but then like throughout the rest of the day, there's a little bit of a bump in your overall energy,
Mm-hmm.
and it has to do with what happens in your body when you exercise.
Well, and it also helps you sleep better when you
Mm-hmm.
exercise.
Yeah.
So all of those things kind of work together. Throughout the day, I do, I have a standing desk, so I'm never like sitting in a chair unless I'm writing in my journal. And if I do that, then I'll take, a few minutes here and there to do stretching. I do yoga every day, which is very energizing and kind of gets all the kinks out of your body. I take a walk every afternoon. Um,
So the yoga thing I think is interesting because if you're feeling tense or tight, sometimes you might not even be aware, like you're just standing at your desk working and stuff like
mhm,
that, but like your body's held a certain way,
mhm.
and that's taking energy because like you're holding a lot of tension.
Yeah, sometimes during the yoga practices, the practitioner will be like, "Let go of any tightness in your jaw," and I'm like, "I don't have any." But then you actually bring attention to your jaw, and you're like, "Wow, I'm like clenching my teeth or something." I don't know
Yeah.
what I'm doing. So it's really nice to have those cues and to let go of some of that tension in your body and feel, you know.
Relax the muscles in your scalp.
I also meditate between 15 and 25 to 30 minutes a day. So that I feel like that creates a lot of energy because it helps you focus, and a lot of times I meditate on gratitude, which is, very energizing, helping you see the things that are good in your life. And um, reading, I do a lot of reading as well. That's energizing for me. I know it wouldn't be for everybody, but for me,
Yeah.
I think I have a lot of automated things in my day. So every night my phone gives me a little ping and tells me it's time for your bedtime routine. And I go in and brush my teeth and wash my face and put my chapstick on so Ben can steal it when he kisses me goodnight.
It's true. Yeah, she has to reapply.
I do.
That's the only reason I kiss her too, is to get that
That
little bit of,
chapstick.
yeah. Yeah, I would say a lot of those things are also on my list of things that I do to stay energized. I do those. So exercise is something that I do for health reasons too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I enjoy the energizing benefits of exercise. I don't get as much sleep as I should, so that's
Yeah.
something I need to work on.
Yeah. Sometimes you stay up really late and get up early.
Hmm. Something you didn't mention, but I think is also a really important factor is how we've structured our diets.
I was just thinking of that about eating healthy food that creates energy because of
It
nutrients.
literally,
Like it
yeah,
literally
you're
creates energy.
you're giving, yeah, like that's basically where all of the energy you have comes from, is from the food that you eat.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and like staying hydrated
Mm-hmm.
is water's like the oil for the body machine.
Machine.
Um, but yeah, like proper nutrition, staying hydrated, giving your body the best kind of energy. Um, I'm not one of those folks, and there's nothing wrong with this, who only think of food as fuel. I think that like that's one way to look at food, and I think that for some people it helps them manage their diets and think about food in a way that's healthy for them. But also, like I really enjoy having a treat and stuff like that. And what I know though is that like if I have something really sugary on a Tuesday morning, you know, and that's like the first thing I eat,
Mm-hmm.
my energy is going to be weird for the rest of the day. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm just not going to be as focused. I'm going to crash earlier than I usually do. You know, weird things happen. And so I find that especially when I know I'm going to need more energy, and there are some exceptions. Um, so like for example, going into a weekend, often I feel a little bit more liberty to have something sweet first thing in the morning because I know we're going to go out as a family and we're going to do some activity, and I'm going to be like doing physical things that are actually going to spend that energy that I've consumed. And yeah, like I would probably be better served with something that's healthier, but I also like I enjoy sweet food,
Yeah,
you
you
know? And
do.
so it's like if I'm going to do it, that's a really good time for me versus sometime during the week.
Yeah,
And
when you're
so
over.
like that is literally a way that you can manage your energy is making decisions about like I want to have this thing, but when I have it is important
Mm-hmm.
because I know that I'm going to need to be more focused during this time. I'm not going to be as physically active, you know, whatever. And that for me helps me kind of make better decisions about where to put those things.
That's interesting. Yeah, I can see that. You're not quite as rigid as I am, so
No, no.
I can see that being helpful.
Yeah. Um, yeah. And then I really like the gratitude thing. I use that often with my work. Um, I love what I do, but I often feel a little bit in over my head, and there are some parts of it that feel a little bit tedious. And when I say in over my head, I think it's less like I don't know what to do, but the things that I need to do to get to the things that I really enjoy that I feel a lot of energy for
Mm-hmm.
are the things that I'm not as interested in. I don't feel like I'm as good at them. Um, and so you know, like when you feel like you're not great at something, it
It
takes
requires more energy to do it.
yeah, it takes a lot more energy to make yourself do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I use this trick on myself where I just kind of I think about my job in general compared to like any other job I've had in the past. And I'm like, wow,
Yeah, you have it good.
like, this is a dream job.
Mm-hmm.
How how is it that I get to wake up and do this? You know, and that change in attitude just re-energizes me. And I don't know, it's this is kind of an interesting thing because that feels like that kind of has the feeling of creating energy out of nothing, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's really what's going on.
I feel like, I mean, it's just a hard thing to pinpoint because I feel incredibly grateful for what I get to do. Like some people would be like standing at your computer and writing nonstop for like 6 hours. That sounds awful to me, but it makes me feel like I'm alive. And I think whenever you are using your gifts and using them in a way that feels like they make a difference in the lives of other people, I think there's just like a natural kind of energy that's created from that, you know?
Yeah, but where does
Purpose, connecting with purpose
yeah.
is, I don't know.
So I guess I'm wondering like where does that come from? Why
I think it's all in the mind. I think it
so you think
top down.
you think that the energy stores are there, but
Hmm.
for some reason, you
Your
know,
brain can
maybe
talk you out of anything.
your attitude, it's almost like it cuts you off
Hmm.
from those energy stores.
Yeah. That's why I mean, I'm not a representative of Apple Fitness or anything like that, but their meditations are amazing because you get to meditate on resilience and on purpose and on creativity. They even have creativity ones that I'm like, this is amazing because it all starts in the mind. You know, if your mind isn't in the right place, you're definitely not going to have energy to do your work or be who you are.
So this is, I think, an interesting idea. I'm not going to pass it off as like
Philosophical.
yeah, as like a philosophy, a philosophy. I'm not going to pass it off as a philosophy that everyone should subscribe to necessarily, but I think it's an interesting theory, at least, that the energy you need, you actually have, but maybe for whatever reason, because of your attitude or your mindset or like the way that you're thinking about the situation you're in, like the way that you think about it is preventing you from being able to access those energy stores. And I wonder, for example, with the kids, how that works out. Because when you dread something, when you know, when you can, like, there are certain things that even just thinking about, like remembering things that I had to do, makes me feel like I'm spending energy. It's like, oh, I remember how it felt to do that. I remember the energy it took. And there's almost this like, I feel like I need to protect myself from that. And so like I'm not going to engage because otherwise I feel like it's just gonna so there's this person that we used to go to church with, and they really this person loved being in conversations, like it was their favorite thing. And they were the kind of, it was like a conversation highway with no off ramps. If you've ever had those kind of conversations, and if you're a very polite person, you might stay there for an hour, who knows. So you described to me this one time that you were in this conversation.
Oh, it was more than once.
Well, yeah, but you were in a conversation with this person, and you started, like, your body started to panic.
It did.
And
I almost passed out because my body was like, that's the way I can get her out.
Or, yeah. No, but it's
Run.
This is what you said, though. It was so funny to me. You were like, it was almost like my body thought it was going to die from being stuck in a conversation. Like you were going to spend so much energy that you were just going to drop dead.
It would deplete everything. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyways,
I feel a little panic right now.
Yeah. Sorry. I didn't mean to bring up that trauma. But you know, the way that you think about that situation keeps you from feeling like you can engage in that kind of situation, and it shuts you off. And when I say you, I mean like anybody. So that's kind of the theory. Like, is the reality maybe that the energy is there? You might actually have energy stores that you can pull from. You might actually be able to engage and go on offense and be enthusiastic and energetic if you thought about it a different way. And I'm not saying necessarily that you can like go against your introversion or something, you know, like I think there are definitely some real physical limitations.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was going to say is I wouldn't say it's true all the time, but I think some of the time, or maybe even a lot of the time, but I think there are cases of physical depletion that can affect our energy. So for example, last night I was sick most of the night, and I went out for my usual run. I usually do 10 miles on Fridays, and I could only make it 6. And I can usually like push myself no matter what I feel like, but I got to mile 4 and I was like, there's no way I'm going to make it all 10. So I came back home, and then I couldn't even finish anything like on the treadmill, and it was just my body was physically depleted of energy. So I think we do come to those points where we are physically depleted and have to pay attention to what our body is saying and rest and slow down. And
Yeah, absolutely. But that also it reminds me of something interesting, which is this idea that like when you're working out, for example, and you feel like, oh, I can't do any more, that's a lot of that is mental.
yeah,
Because,
for sure.
and again, I think this comes back to, the brain loves not spending energy that it doesn't have to. You will stop short of depletion working out because your brain is keeping you from becoming exhausted, like literally exhausted, like you have no more energy to live. Like if you never felt tired, you would basically keep going until you died, which would not be good.
Yeah.
So it's great. It's actually a wonderful thing that your brain is doing for you to keep you alive and to maintain your energy. But what also is true, I think sometimes, is like there probably is more that you can call on if you know how to access it.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's part of the thing with long distance running is that you do know how to call on that. And so the times when you hit mile 4 and your body is just like, I can only give you the rest of this mile. And that's what it said to me this morning. And I was like, no, you're going to at least do 6.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But I think once you pay attention to those things, and maybe this is another topic we do another time, but just like knowing yourself, knowing
your limits,
and knowing the things that bring you energy. And I feel like introspection and self-knowledge is really important in creative work.
Yeah. Well, I think that's good for this topic. We'll leave them wanting a little bit more. In the future we'll talk about knowing and understanding your
thyself.
limits. Yeah. It'll be good. All right. Well, again, as always, I feel like I learned new things about you, and I also feel kind of inspired to try some things for myself. So I hope you out there who are listening feel the same. I hope this was helpful. I would actually love to hear from you. If you're watching this in the live stream on YouTube or on Facebook, I think we stream it on Facebook, YouTube, and on Twitter. So if you're watching this, feel free to leave a comment. I want to hear from you about how you experience energy throughout your day, throughout your week, and what are some things that you do to energize and to manage your energy. You can also go to intheboatpodcast.com and sign up for our newsletter there. We'll share information about special announcements and events and that kind of thing. Rachel, if people want to find you online, where can they go?
RachelTolson.com.
And you can follow me at Ben Tolson, and you can find me at bentolson.com. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time. All right. After show time.
All right.
So how's your energy doing right now?
It's not great today.
Not great.
Yeah. When I don't get enough sleep, I just feel wasted.
See, that's, gosh. Okay. So this is something that we didn't get into, but like COVID really threw the whole energy thing out the window in some ways. Because what COVID aside, I think it's really important to know what your energy usually looks like. Because whether it's COVID or some other underlying illness or a trauma that you're experiencing, sometimes things mess with your energy, and if you if you're not familiar with how your energy flows, you might just think, "Oh, I'm just, like
I'm in a funk or whatever. But
yeah," or you might beat yourself up. Like you might be like, "Why can't I get myself motivated? What's
mm-hmm.
wrong with me? Why am I, and like give yourself a hard time, but there might be something going on and
Depression
it's
does that too.
yeah, exactly. And it's good. This was actually something we talked about earlier in the week. There's a is it Psychology
Mm-hmm.
magazine?
Psychology Today, yeah.
Psychology Today had a really good article, and it was the article was like questions therapists
Mm-hmm.
every therapist should ask, but one of the big ones was, do you feel like yourself?
Yeah. And then what is missing to make you not feel like yourself? So I feel like those two questions to ask ourselves we should bring that into the like self-reflection, knowing yourself
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
one. I feel like they're really important questions. But yeah, like I had COVID, and that was one of the first things I noticed was the energy that was just depleted from me. Like I could not walk up the stairs without getting winded, and I'm usually, running between 8 and 14 miles every day. And I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't go up one flight of stairs without feeling like I had run a marathon. So
Yeah.
paying attention to those kinds of things are important. I didn't let myself take the day off either. Like the day after I tested positive, I ran 10 miles. So
Yeah, there's
that
something
was dumb. Don't do it.
another thing we didn't really talk about, which we probably should have, is the role of rest in
Mm-hmm.
managing energy, because
Yeah,
it's
that's
not
true. Rest is important.
yeah, we were kind of playing with the idea of like maybe there are energy stores, but those can also be depleted. They
Mm-hmm.
can run low, and like you mentioned getting enough sleep, and that's a part of rest. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm writing down another, like we got to talk about rest.
Rest. Yeah.
All right. So that's good. We got a couple of episode ideas out of
Yeah.
this one. That was good.
That was good.
I wanted to share this comment from Anita. Anita, thank you so much for listening. And I'm going to go ahead and share this. Anita says, I tend to shut down, but I'm in the process of changing that tendency. I now find other things not related to what's giving me challenge to keep my energy flowing positively.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a great insight, because we were kind of talking about it from the perspective of trying to find something about the thing that's challenging to feel some gratitude for. But, and I think this is kind of where your meditation comes in, other things that you do, but like trying to find other things outside of, like, if I think about how tedious it is to sit down and try to outline or write a script, for example, and I try to force myself to, like feel a certain way about that, I can get there,
Mm-hmm.
but there are some other things that are kind of an easier path toward finding that energy and that positivity. And then it's like almost to the point where it's not really relevant how I feel about that thing. When I have enough energy, I can sit
Mm-hmm.
down and knock it out.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
So that's a great insight. I appreciate you bringing that up.
All
All right. Well, that's going to do it for us.
right.
Thanks for hopping on, even though you're not feeling great,
Yeah, it's good.
and spending your energy.
Now I'll go sleep.
Yep. All right. We will see you next time. Thanks for listening, and have a good weekend.